This world has changed completely, and not because of lithospheric plate movements or volcanic eruptions. It's because of the countless monsters. They suddenly appeared all over the world and brought the planet to the brink of extinction. And all these countless monsters that our protagonist had to fight with appeared thanks to the tower, a mystical place that gave the monsters strength and power. People call this place the Devil's Tower. And the place is so named because when someone conquers the tower, everything he or she wants is inside. Power, money, honor. You just have to conquer it, and then you'll get everything you want. Pass all the tests that are prepared especially for you. It was a huge tower with 999 floors, and it was ruled by many powerful gods and demons. However, the rulers of all countries tried to keep people away from this tower, but no one could stop the attempts to conquer it. Just as the gods and demons had warned, anyone who prevented others from approaching the tower was destroyed. It's been 5 years since humans tried to conquer the tower. It was humanity's first attempt to conquer the 600th floor. It was already a very high level, and our hero had to fight a huge number of monsters. And in this place, an unbelievably epic battle unfolded that did not stop for a long time. In a rage, our hero shouted at someone across from him. It was a unit called Star 9. Among the millions of people who participated in the conquest of the tower, only 9 people stood out. With the help of magic and divine energy, they gained immeasurable power. Using their abilities, they looked at our hero and realized that he was currently unstable. A fit of rage and anger enveloped the protagonist, who didn't think of giving up just yet. Do they really think they can resist his will? It will end in death for them. This hero may not be a master of weapons, and he may not have superpowers, but he is the one who betrayed the 9-star squad and earned the title of the strongest. In the next instant, the young man uttered a single word with a sarcastic smile: awake. He was the one who brought destruction to everyone around him. And in the next second, a huge number of undead began to awaken and rise from the ground. The true embodiment of death and resurrection through the most powerful magic. This was the greatest necromancer of all time. Anyway, he had had enough of humans by now, and was happy to see a huge army of his humble servants ready for battle. With a gloating voice, he announced to the crowd that all he needed from them was their strength, and he would use them all to become the greatest of the greatest. One of the warriors in the group managed to say that the young man had betrayed humanity and made contact with a demon. But in the next second, countless skeleton warriors descended upon them. They all prepared for battle. The strongest mage in the group felt that they had no choice but to destroy the traitor, so he began to recite his spells. An epic battle ensued, pitting the strongest heroes against a large army of undead. Countless streams of energy arrows rained down on the skeletons, and the mages continued to recite their spells. However, no matter how hard our hero tried, he couldn't stand a chance against such a strong unit, and he couldn't defeat them alone. Now, with the full force of this troop bearing down on him, all he could do was accept the punishment for his betrayal of humanity. Swords, arrows, and magic spears rained down on him in a huge stream, and he had no way to repel this attack. Did he betray humanity to gain incredible power? However, this was only a popular legend. This strongest necromancer did not betray humanity. In fact, he was the one who was betrayed by a group called the 9 Stars, but the people weren't told about it. It's been 9 years since then. We enter the home of a young man whose house is in complete disarray and chaos. Mountains of unwashed dishes, garbage, flies, and someone talking loudly under the covers. This someone promised to return and cursed the now hated group of 9. The young man threw down the blanket and shouted loudly that they would pay for the atrocity they had committed. But in the next second, his mood changed drastically. He was very surprised and very happy because his secret skill had worked. That secret skill was soul transfer. Just before death, this skill allows you to move your soul into a suitable body. The dying necromancer was able to take on a body with similar physical characteristics. And this young man was still in South Korea. A new wave of rage swept over his body, and he gripped the sheet of the bed tightly. Our hero cursed his sworn enemies. If he went to the 600th floor alone, he'd be fine. But they offered to help him and then betrayed him. We go back to the day when the dying necromancer was drawing his last breath. He was badly wounded and covered in blood. He was extremely curious as to why in the world they had betrayed him. Out of the entire group, two came to him. They were Paladin Cain Pelin and Saint Carmen Pelin. They believed that he would not be able to summon his undead on this holy ground. With a grin, the girl told him that even though they considered him a whole army in the person of one man, he had no chance against them. The strength slowly left him, and his voice grew quieter. He only wanted to help. The paladin told him that it was nothing personal, just business. And it did not mean that they had a bad attitude towards him. It's just that they decided to create an environment where he had no chance to win. At that moment, he realized many things, and with the last of his strength, he cried out loudly, remembering the name of one of his friends. It was one of his battle buddies, the star of this squad, who for some reason hadn't decided to participate in the sweep of the 600th floor. He now realized that they hadn't informed his friend that they were going to sweep that floor because they were afraid he might help our hero. The young man's eyes began to blur as he lost too much blood. No doubt, it was his miscalculation, but as far as they are concerned, he will only die once, and they are unaware of his hidden abilities. They certainly shouldn't think it was a complete end, and the young man began to use his magic. He will definitely get stronger, come back and take revenge on all those traitors. His strength began to leave him, and he gradually lost consciousness. We return to the room of this young man who has had very painful memories. Now he would surely make sure to destroy their souls and prevent them from being reborn. He'll make them his monsters. But the next second his attention was drawn to the phone on the bed. Surprised, he looked at the device and picked it up. He liked this device, for it had been a long time since he had held something like this in his hands. Suddenly, a sharp shock went through his entire body. The current date he saw on the screen of his phone surprised him. Had it really been 10 years? He grabbed his head and couldn't understand how this was possible. It was just a blink of an eye for him, but it's been a whole 10 years. He immediately remembered his skills. Could he really use magic in his new body? There were still flies swirling around him, and they caught his attention. Suddenly, he clapped his hands and managed to catch one of the flies. Now this little creature had certainly lost its life, and he decided to test his abilities. Looking at the insect in his hand, he said in a commanding voice, "Awake?" Suddenly, the voice assistant on his phone said that it was able to find some information on the query "awake." And in the next second, the young man was beyond angry and furious. He kept shouting and repeating the word, addressing the fly in his hand. He demanded that it get up and be alive again. Sweating heavily, he realized that he would fail because there wasn't a single drop of magic power in this body. Did it really mean that he would have to conquer the tower again? He pulled back the curtain to look at the tower through his window. He immediately grabbed his phone again, because if it was 10 years ago, this team must have advanced a lot and almost reached the top. Our protagonist quickly started scrolling the screen with his fingers, reading the latest news. Then he discovered that his former friend from the Star 9 had made it to the 800th floor. He was very surprised to hear such news. Had they really only been able to climb 200 floors in the last 10 years? Now the young man realized that this was his chance, and while they were wasting time, he would be able to climb all the floors of this tower and take his revenge on them. With a sudden movement of his hand, he grabbed his jacket. Our protagonist fully understood that it was useless to practice outside the tower, so we should go there right away. Even though his body was like that of a beginner, his knowledge and skills hadn't gone anywhere. He was using all his knowledge and techniques to become stronger as soon as possible. The entrance to the tower was right in the heart of the city. Many people came to this place to try their luck and receive unique rewards. Many in this crowd believed that they could clear the tower and become rich, but our hero had a different goal. He was very serious because the tower was the kind of place that held many stories. Those very unique stories from his past when he interacted with the strongest inhabitants of that place. It was a time when his many battles with countless monsters destroyed all the forests around him in order to gain unique rewards. He lived in complete prosperity and had everything. He had a huge amount of gold coins and other jewelry. And in this unique, magical city, in this place, he'd make sure that everyone knew about him. But first, he had to enter the tower. The massive gate swung open, and the people saw a magical portal in front of them. Everyone was very excited, but there was no time to relax because the adventure was about to begin. With a shout, the whole crowd ran joyfully forward, and only our hero walked perfectly still. It seems the time has come for him to take his true revenge. And no sooner had our hero passed through this magical portal than the massive entrance doors slammed loudly shut at the same second. Standing in the center of the magic circle, he was back in familiar surroundings, and the system greeted him. He thought back to the last time he'd had this kind of training, and it seemed like years ago. Welcome to the training floor. The system welcomed him again. It was a special training area, and he was standing at the very beginning, at the start. He exhaled sadly because he had to go through this training again. It was the only floor with such a strange level of difficulty. It will take a few days to reach the end of the trap-filled path. Everyone said that of the 10 floors, this was the stupidest one. A new system message appeared in front of his eyes. The goal is to reach the end by overcoming all obstacles. Wounds will heal when you reach your destination or return to your starting point. Good luck. The young warrior immediately wanted to check his stats, so he activated the screen. He had only one talent, mana. There was no class or subclass, but the other skills were close to one. He also had the ability gluttony. Terrible, our hero thought to himself. These were not the characteristics he had before. Are his traits, abilities, and talents different just because he changed his body? Nevertheless, he stretched hard and made the decision to get the most out of this training area. And in the next second, he made a quick dash forward to break through to the end of this training ground. The system immediately informed him that he had left the starting point and that the magic arrow trap had been activated. He easily dodged the first shot, which didn't do him any favors. Our hero was glad to see the arrows flying out. His secret skill didn't seem to be going anywhere, but he rejoiced too soon, because a moment later, more arrows flew towards him. It might even be too many for a first practice. However, he was still running forward and could easily dodge the arrows. But suddenly, as he turned his head and looked forward, more arrows flew in his direction, and they hit him right in the middle of his chest. The young man felt the first pain, but he didn't give up and had just a little bit of time left to reach the finish line. But to his surprise, he looked up and saw a huge number of arrows flying straight at him. And in the next second, they plunged into his body, inflicting multiple wounds. The pain was so intense that he cried out for the first time in a long time. However, as he gathered all his strength into a fist, he realized that he had to ignore such intense pain and move forward at all costs. Nevertheless, more and more arrows flew in his direction, and after a while, his entire path was soaked in blood. He managed to reach the starting point. However, he was almost unable to move, so he fell down and lay motionless. The system informed him that he was back at the starting point, and all his wounds were healed. He had completely forgotten how painful it was to go through the training area for the first time. We'll see how long he lasts. When he fully recovered and was able to look back, he saw the huge pools of blood left by his wounds. It seemed that one couldn't just run forward without thinking. There must be some kind of special plan. There are 2 characteristics that make him the strongest conqueror on Earth. One of those characteristics is gluttony, and he licked a finger with blood on it. Because of this trait, he can absorb all the dead and take their power for himself. Although the blood he spilled had no life-giving power, the experience he gained from the blood went completely to him. The system immediately reported that he had received an award and that all his stats had increased by 1. Sure, he was happy that his experience had increased, but you don't have to dig through the system settings to get rid of side effects. Even though it might take him a whole week to complete his training and become a great conqueror, he decided to take on all the arrows and continue his training. He will improve his performance with gluttony. As a result, he repeatedly received multiple wounds from the sheer number of arrows that flew at him. He ran forward as fast as he could to sneak to the finish line. And all the while he was training, his characteristics were gradually improving. A whole month passed like this. Although he already had many arrows in his body, he had become strong enough to stand on his feet at the finish line. The system congratulated him that he had finally completed the training, and now all his wounds were healed. Although he had to put in a lot of effort, he was still happy to have achieved such a result. Suddenly, A new message appeared, and the system informed him that several gods and demons were interested in our hero. He took a deep breath, and in the next second, anger swept through his entire body. He started cursing and remembering all the gods and demons who were interested in finding someone like him. What miserable sadists they are. Our hero thought to himself. Numerous messages from gods and demons began to appear around our hero. The noise irritated him, but none of them revealed their real names. It seemed that they were using some tricks to make him their personal disciple. He was doing well in the training, so he felt that they didn't need to be bossed around. It seemed that among all of them, only the head demon was happy with his behavior, so he smiled. Suddenly, the ruler of evil decided to address our hero directly and ask how he was doing. And when our hero saw this message, he started cursing and remembering this demon with bad words. Because the ruler of evil in a past life pursued our hero to make him his servant. He seemed to recognize him. As if addressing the demon, the young man smiled and said that he was pleased to have received from him a special ability to move souls. He made full use of it. And as they continued to communicate, more and more messages from the system appeared around our hero. There were so many of them, and they were drawn to him with such force that it was extremely difficult to avoid them. It seems that it was all because of the evil ruler who paid too much attention to the hero. Now he asked for forgiveness. The young man shouted loudly that he was really fed up with all of them, so they should shut up. Each of these gods and demons would like to be the one chosen by our hero, but if they want to watch, they should just shut their mouths and watch. At this point, the message said that the evil lord was offended, but the hero, as if addressing that demon, said that he would choose anyone but him. However, he was very interested in seeing the reward for his training, and as soon as he said that, his body began to absorb the many magical vortices of the experience he had gained. The new system message reported that its numbers had increased greatly. The protagonist gained invulnerability to blood loss, pain, amnesia, clairvoyance, clairsentience, and patience, including a very large increase in his stats, especially experience and mana. He was glad, especially for mana, because it wasn't that easy to increase it on this floor. His talent is mana. He will be able to increase it even though it doesn't normally increase. The system confused him with a new notification, telling him that a second feature had been unlocked due to his progress. This information surprised him because he already had another trait, gluttony. However, the line with the new trait was just a question mark. For a moment, it seemed as if he could already see his past body obsessed with this trait. And the next second, the system informed him that the trait was open. It was called multiplicity. He was even more confused by this information because he didn't understand what it meant. But versatility is a talent that allows you to master any skill. The technique doesn't matter. Skill corrections are made during training. During combat, additional adjustments are made based on the skill level. He finally realized what this meant and smiled broadly. With such a feature, he was truly invincible. A new wave of memories washed over his entire body. He had once fought for a title that he could never obtain. It was the title of the Almighty. However, a new system message brought our hero back to reality and informed him that the Lord of Evil was curious about his statistics. The young man was very surprised and indignant at such insolence. He wasn't in the mood for any kind of conversation at all. Our hero himself was not happy with his performance, so he went to the magic portal. But if the demon wants, he can go with him. That was all the evil lord wanted, so he joined the young man. MC knew that the next room was supposed to be a training area. The system immediately informed him with a new message that he was logged in. And now that he was in this amazing place, this room, he could choose the weapon and class that would best suit him. The system informed him that once he had made his choice, he would have to break through the floor to get to the first level of the tower. The young man hesitated before the wand, because in his past life, after learning about mana, he didn't even delay for a second and decided to become a mage. This time, however, he greedily grabbed the bow and loudly commanded the system to generate targets for him. He was very curious to try out his new skill, which was called multiple personality. Moments later, the system reported that all the targets had been generated and he could begin training. Our hero immediately drew his bowstring, and one by one, arrows began to fly towards the target, hitting each of the dozen targets accurately. He decided to level up because he thought it was too easy, so he asked the system to generate more targets. He also wanted them to attack him. The system immediately made a warning sound, telling him that he hadn't chosen a class yet, so his target could be extremely dangerous. With a wry smile, our hero declared that he didn't care and was ready to proceed. Well, since that was the case, new targets were generated, and this time they were giant robots to fight. Now the targets were able to attack the player, and without wasting any time they rushed at our hero. But he easily dodged their blows and quickly shot his arrows at these virtual enemies. With tremendous force, each arrow released hit the target accurately. But their stream did not stop, and they continued to attack our hero. They had gotten as close as they could, and it looked like they were going to get him. However, in the next second, he sliced them in half with a sharp stroke of his sword. His weapon was already slightly damaged, and the steel was red-hot from the incessant blows. But that wasn't enough for him, and he angrily declared that the system would make them even stronger. He wanted to raise the stakes as high as possible, and as soon as he said that, a new message appeared in front of him, saying that more targets had been created and the difficulty had been increased to the maximum level. Huge robots began to move in his direction. But even these virtual monsters felt that their opponent was much stronger than all of them put together. Grabbing a huge spear and leaping high, our hero smashed his weapon into the virtual enemy's head, knocking him to the ground with a loud thud. The next second, he grabbed the daggers hidden behind his back and dealt with the other two giants. His movements were so precise, and he moved so fast that his enemies had no chance to defeat him. But a strange buzzing sound began to echo behind him, and he turned his attention to it. They were several flying attack drones that immediately began to engage him. He began to run away from them, trying to find some cover, and in the meantime, the system kept alerting him with a loud beeping sound that the strongest targets that could be presented on this level were now being generated. However, his quick escape was not due to fear at all. He said with a smile, "I don't think these are the strongest monsters." This situation seemed to force him to return to the idea of becoming a mage. He immediately grabbed the nearby magic wand and prepared to deliver a powerful energy strike. The flying drones had already prepared their plasma cannons to attack. However, he declared with a smile that he was much faster, and in the next second, he unleashed his incredibly powerful magic arrow. His shot came just in time, and all three flying objects were instantly destroyed. Now that the main danger to him was over, he looked down at his hand with satisfaction. Was this really all this new skill, this versatility, could show? It felt like he'd been familiar with this skill for 100 years. The system immediately informed him that he had received a new achievement, and this confused our hero a bit. Being omnipotent, he could use at least one weapon from each category in the training room. That's why his reward is a special multi-class. It's now unlocked. His attack points have also increased by 5,000. The line about multi-classing confused the young man even more. What is it? Is it some kind of special class or something else? But he didn't have much time to think about it, because a new system message offered him a choice. He should select All Master as his class. Besides, he won't be able to choose this class when he leaves the room. Being an experienced warrior, he knew that this strange new term All Master could not affect his decision to give up his main advantage. So he immediately informed the system that he was choosing All Master as his subclass. However, he received a reply that such a thing was impossible, and this message surprised him greatly. A new information window appeared in front of him, saying that subclasses would only be available after the 100th floor. In order to unlock the subclass, you must complete the 100th floor. It's been too long, and he seems to have forgotten those requirements. But if he doesn't choose a class, he won't be able to get out of here. In that case, maybe he should have used his achievement points. So he decided to ask the system if he could use achievement points to open a subclass. For a while, the system hesitated a lot, as if it didn't have enough processing power. How would a newbie know? At their core, achievement points were a special currency that players received after battles. With these points, players could make changes to the system. With irritation in his voice, our hero said that there was no point in asking how he knew about it. He would like to use his 5,000 points to unlock subclasses. I hope that's possible, the young man asked. The system thought for a while and then informed him that it was possible. He saw a new message saying that he didn't have enough points to unlock the subclass. He took a deep breath and realized that he had no choice but to turn to the demon for help. He immediately demanded that this hidden Lord of Darkness reveal his identity and speak to him. Isn't that a success? The system immediately informed him that he had a new achievement open. He communed with the ruler of evil. Talk to the best demon and get 200 points for it. Even the Lord of Evil was pleased to see how many points our hero had earned, and he immediately inquired about how well he had done. And while the demon was annoyed by our hero's reaction, the system informed the young man that he could use achievement points to unlock a subclass. Congratulations, you have just added a subclass called All Master, the system informed him. And now, as our hero shouted with joy, he raised his wand high above his head. Bright, energetic flashes of lightning began to fly around the room. Now he had to destroy it to get to the first level of the tower. He was very happy about this event, because now it was time for real revenge. With tremendous force, he stabbed his wand into the floor of this training room, and the system informed him that he was being transported to the first level of the tower. The first level was a vast forest inhabited by sinister monsters. Meanwhile, a small group of heroes struggled to fend off the attacks of these forest dwellers. And just as one of these evil monsters rushed to attack the young knight, in the next second, a huge crackle appeared in the sky in the energy portal, through which our hero came down as if from nowhere. As if he had spotted his first prey, he swooped down on the monster at a tremendous speed. With enormous power, he immediately kicked it with his foot and completely destroyed the beast. While these warriors and the monsters watched this incredible scene without a second thought, our hero smiled and said that he was very happy to see them all. The forest monsters roared with rage and didn't know what to do next. But it was clear from the expression on the young man's face that he had prepared for their complete destruction. He wondered how much experience he would gain if he could devour them all. Turning his back on this trio of novice warriors, our hero looked intently at the two remaining kobolds. The young knight was pleased with the hero's attack, for he was able to defeat the monster with a single blow. In this novice's opinion, the mage in front of him was the strongest mage, even though he used his leg to attack. One of them suggested that our hero fight together and join forces to achieve more. However, our hero replied with a "back off," while a magical aura enveloped his entire body. These newcomers were very surprised by this response, as few could refuse such a tempting offer. MC turned to one of them and said in a stern voice that if he touched one of the kobolds, he would die instantly. All three of them immediately began to tremble with extreme fear, and in the next second, they started to run away with all their legs while our hero looked at them with his magic gaze. However, there were still two monsters to deal with. With a grin, the young man looked in their direction and said that they would surely want to avenge their comrade. The two monsters immediately rushed to attack, getting as close as they could to our hero. Suddenly, the kobold was struck on the head with a magic rod. Then, with quick blows, our hero finished him off on the ground, while the third monster stood dazed and didn't know what to do. The novice player looked at the small monster and asked it with a demonic voice, wondering why it did not dare to attack him. And in the next second, that forest creature began to run away from the culprit of his friends with great speed. But the monster had no chance, because the young man activated his magic wand, and in the next instant, he released a huge magic arrow towards the enemy, piercing it and destroying it instantly. Now that all three monsters were on the ground and the dust from the battle had cleared, our hero set about collecting the gems. As a reward, he received a mana stone for each kobold he defeated. The system showed him a new message. He had to complete another quest to get to the next floor. Quest description. We had to kill 10 kobolds. It's a piece of cake, our hero said. He was ready to defeat 100 of them. At the same time, he thought it would be really cool to get a special achievement called Slayer. If you kill a monster 1,000 times, you can get the Slayer achievement. In the past, he had bypassed all the kobolds to get all the achievements. Standing confidently on his feet and holding his staff in his right hand, he was ready for refreshment after this short battle. With great joy, he uttered the word gluttony, and his left hand began to emit magical energy. He immediately began to absorb the experience he had gained from fighting those monsters. It was as if he had swallowed all their energy after a hearty meal, and in the next second, his eyes lit up with a bright red glow as he began to see all the memories of those monsters. He was gradually gaining the full power of those creatures and could already understand their language. The magical aura around his body became brighter and brighter, and his eyes became lighter and lighter. A player information window with his current stats appeared in front of him, and although he didn't have a class yet, his talent was mana. His intelligence and speed also increased significantly. He really liked what he saw, as these stats were typical of a 10th level player. Suddenly, he noticed that a class adjustment was taking place, and since he had a multi-class, he got the advantage of each class separately. The next second, a wave of new kobold memories washed over his head. One of those kobolds seemed to be in a hurry to go somewhere. As if in his body, our hero saw everything from a first-person perspective. After a moment, the image changed and the young man saw the kobold lord in front of his eyes. He was very happy about this memory, because he knew exactly where to go for the next battle. After all, in a fight with this monster lord and his many slaves, he could get a new achievement and raise his level at the same time. However, facing them would also require a whole army of his fighters, so the young man stretched out his left arm and prepared to use his main skill, the necromancer skill. Smiling broadly, he happily uttered his favorite word, awake, and in the next second, thanks to his magic, the bodies of the defeated monsters began to transform into skeleton warriors. Joy washed over our hero's entire body as he felt himself back in his familiar world. He closed his eyes and seemed to be in a state of meditation. At that moment, the system informed him that he had successfully changed his class. His main class is now Necromancer. As his new servants bowed to their almighty master, our hero reminded himself that the memories of his past life had made it very easy for him to change classes. But that was apparently not enough for him, as there was still a hidden classroom, and he would have to go to the first floor to find it. Meanwhile, one of his new skeleton warriors sensed something strange. A small group of kobolds came out of the forest at the sound, and some of them could not recognize their former friends who were now skeletons. The young man ordered his soldiers to kill everyone in their path, and the skeletons rushed to attack the kobolds. Moments later, our hero was collecting gems as a reward. Now that he had a small group of soldiers, the system informed him that 10 out of 35 monsters had been defeated. With a large bag of gems slung over his shoulder, the young man headed for the spot that would open the way to the first floor. He found an abandoned hut in the forest. With a slight movement of his left hand, he tossed the front door aside. Fortunately, the house was untouched. He ordered his troops to wait outside and then, with a powerful kick of his foot, he smashed the floorboards right in the middle of the room. Bingo! He opened a hidden passageway and began to slowly descend this huge stone staircase. The hidden classroom was on the first floor, and while our hero was slowly descending these stairs, he was scattering gems behind his back for some obscure purpose. Necromancer was a high class that allowed you to absorb souls. He came to a place where there was a huge stone crypt. He needed a spiritual master. He walked right up to this huge coffin because the first spiritual master was inside it. And in the next second, that same spiritual master suddenly appeared out of that coffin. This is how our hero was able to change his class. That bony sage who floated in the air was called Vulcan. Was it really his descendant? The awakened skeleton wondered. Our hero looked him straight in the eye and declared, without the slightest fear, that he was very happy to see him. Vulcan was somewhat surprised by such a bold greeting. The young man didn't seem to be the least bit surprised, despite his best efforts to frighten him. Now he's even a little embarrassed. Our hero replied that he was already a necromancer, so why should he be scared at the sight of a skeleton? Then he added that he had already read the skeleton's journal, so he had nothing to be surprised about for a long time. It was a special secret item, the Journal of Spiritual Master Vulcan. Of course, our hero did not read it in this life. But in his previous life, when he became a magician and lost all his items, he found this journal and returned to the first floor. And when he became a spiritual master, he failed to raise Vulcan. Folding his bony arms across his chest, the skeleton in the cloak replied that he clearly liked the young man. Suddenly, He spread his arms wide and declared that the young man was much better than the rude brat who had appeared before him 10 years ago. His words clearly did not please our hero, but he decided to play with him a little more before finishing him off. However, he needed to change classes, and he needed to do it quickly, so he asked the skeleton to do it for him. But the skeleton replied that he had to go up to the 10th floor first. After all, the spiritual master class is higher than even a necromancer. You have to go to the 10th floor of the class shifting tower to change classes, and then you can come back down here. No sooner had he said this than the young man confidently informed him that he was already a necromancer. He then displayed a system message showing his current class and subclass. His information elicited admiration from the skeleton, whose eyes lit up like bright stars. Could he really change classrooms without going to the 10th floor? I mean, it's just amazing. It's just an incredible talent. This young man is clearly tougher than the rascal he saw earlier. His words once again made our hero very angry. He interrupted the skeleton and asked him once again to change his class as soon as possible. And while our hero sat in front of him in the lotus position, Vulcan raised his hands to the sky and activated his magic power. Huge energy vortices began to swirl around the room, activating a special energy zone in the center of our hero's chest. A long time ago, before the tower appeared on Earth, Vulcan was the climber who ruled over it. Even though he was the strongest necromancer, he was always looking for ways to become even more powerful. Skin and bones were clearly not enough. Was there a way to become stronger? He had tried many and wanted to call upon someone completely different. Now he understood exactly, and he decided that he would summon the souls of the dead. In that case, he would be able to create someone who would be outstanding. He finally succeeded in creating a new class, Spiritual Masters. But there was a nuance. His old body had used up all its strength, and the class of Spiritual Masters was on the verge of extinction. That's why he chose his final path. He decided to use necromancy on himself, in the hope that posterity would honor him. Vulcan truly hoped that one day he would find a walker to follow in his footsteps. That's why he became half NPC. At that moment, the energy center in our hero's chest began to glow brightly, much to the skeleton's surprise. The young man was now on his feet and felt the full strength he had just gained. With great pomp, Vulcan told him that the rascal he had mentioned before was the second. Now this young man has become the third spiritual master. According to Vulcan, this player is now able to use his soul vessel to capture the souls of others. He could also summon many of the dead to his side. The young man was very happy to hear this news, and he smiled a lot. Now he had a soul vessel, and it seems that Vulcan will be his first victim. To thank the young man, the skeleton crossed his arms over his chest and congratulated his new offspring. Now he will conquer the tower and glorify his name. But the young man suddenly told him with a grin to do it himself. His words made Vulcan very angry, for he had forgotten the main promise written in the journal. Delegating his work to others was a bad habit. However, our hero was willing to correct this misunderstanding and began to slowly approach the skeleton. Sensing that something bad was about to happen to him, Vulcan tensed up and couldn't believe his eyes. Now he began to guess who was really standing before him. And in the next second, our hero activated his magical vessel to absorb Vulcan's soul. As if screaming in intense pain and unable to resist, this skeleton slowly but surely began to lose its soul. However, he still possessed incredible strength. Did this young man really think he could just take his soul? But it seemed that it was too late, and the young man had succeeded in his plan. On the ground were the beautiful gems that had been given to him as a reward. This was too insulting, and the skeleton gave him the middle finger. After all, he was well aware of the bad deeds of a past descendant. He wished the young man to see him in hell. In the next moment, Vulcan tried to attack our hero, but he failed because he was stuck in a special magical wall that surrounded him. It was magic that our hero used. A special magic wall, an inferior spell. It created a personal prison from which he could not escape. These words caused the skeleton to fly into a rage. Does he really think he'll get away with this? He was ready to break this simple spell in an instant. However, our hero told him with a grin that this wasn't the end of it, and that he had something special in store for him. Now we knew why he was scattering those rocks along the path. He is using magic to make them work. Kneeling in front of the new spiritual master, the skeleton listened intently to the young man who claimed that he wouldn't be able to break these enchantments because he would catch him early. The Vulcan still didn't realize who was standing in front of him because, in his opinion, a first-floor wanderer couldn't possibly have such abilities. Removing the hood from his head, our hero informed him with a smile that although he had failed in his past life, he would definitely not miss him in this one. What past life could this young man be talking about? Slowly but surely, the skeleton realized what was happening. Now he realized who was standing in front of him. With great joy, our hero told him that he was still the second spiritual master and by no means the third. Now that Vulcan was clear, a fit of rage swept over him and he loudly called out our player's name. Unfortunately, that was the end of him, and our hero activated his soul absorption ability and absorbed him. And although it was very difficult to do this to our hero, because Vulcan still resisted strongly, in the next moment, his soul finally flew into a special vessel in our hero's chest. Now it was the most ordinary skeleton with which our hero could do anything. He told Vulcan not to be upset, because with him all his dreams would come true. Coming out of the forest, our hero had his own squad of small skeleton warriors waiting for him. Numerous messages began to appear around the young man. For example, the Lord of Evil was watching him. The Demon of Death was also interested in his class. After all, gods and demons couldn't enter the class-changing place. With a smile, he told them all that he would show them everything soon. They just didn't need to bother him. Our hero looked carefully at his small group of soldiers. It seemed that he didn't need his usual army of skeletons anymore. So he decided to do something interesting with them. He waved his hand and cast a new spell, causing streams of energy to fly in all directions. Now he activated the glowing center in his chest and shouted loudly, "Awake!" Then, with a smile, he began to watch as the many souls of the kobolds he had fought earlier burst out of his body. He called them spiritual soldiers, and now they were his servants. It was an army of a completely different quality, much stronger than the previous one. He looked at them with his questioning gaze and realized that they couldn't speak either. In the next second, however, he heard someone calling his name and cursing him. He turned to see a man crouching beside him, holding his head. This man was the young incarnation of the late spiritual master Vulcan. He despised our hero for daring to use him as his spiritual soldier. However, the young man responded to his displeasure with a joke, saying that it was the first time he had seen him in this form. He must have been very handsome when he was young. The next moment, the man began to shout in anger that he wasn't going to let it go, and that the young man was wrong to underestimate him as the first spiritual master. However, he immediately calmed down and all his strength left him as he began to cough and wheeze violently. Our hero told him not to overdo it, because he was alive because of his mana. If he cut off his access to this magical source, he would immediately dissolve into the wind. The man still argued with him, saying that he would not listen to the young man like his faithful dog. Our hero got as close to him as he could and asked him with a snide smile if he thought he had a choice in the situation. Exhausted, the man fell to the ground, and our hero reminded him of what he had once done to those who refused to obey him. He formed their souls into a ball and then absorbed them. The young man showed him his tongue and licked it. Had the volcano forgotten what a peculiarity he had? The man was horrified, for he realized that his opponent still possessed the mad skill of gluttony. If he disobeyed him, our hero would simply devour him. Accepting his fate and resigning himself to the inevitable, the man asked the protagonist what he was going to do now. With a smile, our hero replied that he should have realized everything by now, and pointed in the direction of the great castle that stood high on the mountain. Then he added that they would go there together to get rid of his lord of all kobolds. It was an ordinary, quiet night, and the bright moon shone high in the sky, promising no trouble for the two guards standing at the entrance to the castle. But suddenly they noticed someone approaching their direction with a soft step. The guards lowered their spears and prepared to stop this intruder. However, with a broad smile on his face, the young man activated his magic ability, and in the next second, ghost soldiers burst out of his body and attacked the kobolds, destroying them completely. Now, The entire army and his personal soldier were accompanying our hero on his way to the lord of the castle, and nothing could stop them. Of course, more and more monsters that guarded the place appeared on their way, but they didn't stand a chance. As soon as they tried to attack our hero, his obedient servants immediately destroyed all the monsters and turned them into just another spiritual soldier. Our hero decided that he would not go without a fight, so he decided to pick up a spear from the ground. Now he knew very well that all those ghost soldiers would lead him straight to the lord of this castle. Meanwhile, in the spacious room that housed the most important kobold, very strange things were happening. The lord of the castle was informed that an uninvited guest had arrived, and he immediately ordered a sacrifice to be prepared for him. At the same time, our hero's squad of special soldiers was already close to this room, and on their way, they destroyed one monster after another, turning them into new servants for our hero. The most epic battle unfolded in this narrow corridor, as some of them tried to fight while others thought of fleeing. Much to the delight of our hero, he found another victim and easily twisted the little kobold's neck. Suddenly, a secret room opened right above our warrior's head, and several monsters jumped out and tried to attack him. However, in the next second, our protagonist's spiritual soldiers gave these creatures no chance, destroying them completely and saving his master. Our necromancer was more than angry, so he grabbed his sword in one swift motion, and in the next second, he swept down the corridor with great speed, chopping all the remaining kobolds into small pieces. Standing next to his humble servants, he watched the defeated enemies and realized that his hidden class was something incredible. Our hero was able to sense the special aura emanating from the lord of all kobolds. The room where the lord of this castle resided was just around the corner. Totally out of place above our hero's head was the message that the evil lord was supporting his actions by waving his lightsabers around like a Jedi from Star Wars. Our hero took a deep breath and declared that he didn't need the support of an old man with hairy legs because he was going to win anyway. With these words, he began to advance with a confident and calm step. At that time, the lord of the castle had strange happenings in his room. He plunged his sword into another victim. It seemed that these were special sacrifices, and he needed more blood. The first kobold shouted loudly that there was no way to stop until the demon lord watching death was satisfied. He held out his hand to receive a new victim, brought to him by one of his servants. It was a small, defenseless girl with little horns on her head, whom the kobolds had captured earlier in their forest. She struggled, but they kept dragging her forward to her impending doom. The lord of the castle was very happy to have such a meeting. She seemed to be much better than the average person. His face lit up with a smile as he looked into the frightened girl's eyes. But suddenly, something flew between his hand and the defenseless girl's hand with great speed. So he let go of her, and she fell to the ground. It turned out to be our hero, who had swung his sword in her direction and was now watching her from above. Eventually, the Goblin Lord noticed the intruder and called him the most insulting names. Ignoring his insults, the new spiritual master smiled and asked what they were doing here. Perhaps they were offering a sacrifice or making a special invocation to the spirits. He took off his hood and confidently told the kobold that it didn't matter, because either way he would be finished now. Standing on this balcony, our hero watched the lord of the kobolds, his warriors, and the unfortunate girl who was about to perish. Through gritted teeth, the lord turned to his uninvited guest. The young man said with a smile that he must be the lord of the kobolds, for his appearance indicated that he was the leader of some scum. His words caused the owner of this place to have a violent fit of anger and rage. He shouted that he was the king of the kobolds. He demanded that the man show him his respect. However, our hero just laughed at his request, saying that he was too arrogant for a first-level monster, so he should try to make him do what he wants. Meanwhile, the girl sat on the floor, unaware of what was going on. She noticed that the kobold's lord was distracted by the man. This seemed to be her chance, and in the next second she tried to escape. But the lord of the castle immediately used his magic and summoned a demon that watches over death. He asked him to give him strength. His spells surprised our hero. Could he really summon this special demon as his assistant? Suddenly, the monster's lord dropped a special corpse bomb in the girl's direction. It seemed that just a little more and this energy blast would catch up with its unfortunate victim, who was trying to escape from this place with all her might. To her horror, she stumbled and immediately fell to the ground. It seemed that she would be destroyed for good. She was gripped by terror and the realization of imminent death. But in the next instant, our hero rushed forward with great speed to save her. He struck a sharp blow with his fist and barely had time to destroy this deadly threat. The lord of the castle couldn't believe his eyes. His attack seemed to have failed. The young man watched him happily from the sidelines and smiled. He took the weapon with his one blow. The girl thanked her savior, but he told her that now was not the time for such words and that she should just run away from here. However, our hero was very surprised when he noticed that she had little horns on her head. But is she really a goblin? Goblins are very powerful creatures that live on the 100th floor. There's no reason for them to go any lower, especially for a single person who hasn't even reached adulthood yet. Has something happened on the 100th floor? Our hero decides to rescue her so that he can sort things out and question her about everything. Meanwhile, the king of the castle was furious and shouted at our hero. How dare he interfere with this sacrifice to the Almighty? However, our hero's main task now was to help the girl. He advised her to take shelter if she didn't want to die. The girl obediently agreed and ran forward in search of a safe place. Suddenly, the king of the castle reactivated his magic and turned his servants into veritable blood bombs. Their entire bodies swelled to incredible proportions, and it was clear that this bomb was about to explode. And in the next second, two powerful explosions rang out. But our hero, thanks to his abilities, was able to quickly leave this unsafe place. A moment later, he was flying towards the castle king with great speed. He prepared his fist and said with a smile before attacking that his opponent was too slow. Then he struck a very hard blow, knocking the owner of the place to the side. The veteran king was perplexed as to how a ground floor walker could have such incredible strength. However, our hero did not think to stop, as he felt that they had only just begun, and he prepared to strike again. But no sooner had he done so than the king, in the next second, summoned the demon of death and asked it to save him. While our hero was still in the air, a huge monster suddenly appeared out of a huge pool of blood and immediately grabbed his hand, preventing him from touching the king of the castle. In the next instant, the young man saw a huge, terrifying blood monster in front of his eyes. It was a blood golem. Our hero couldn't understand how the old man managed to summon such a high-level creature on the first floor. But he had no time to think, because in the next second, this golem hit our hero directly on the stone floor with incredible force. The monster's actions made the king of the castle smile and laugh. According to him, this was his most powerful initiation rite. Meanwhile, our hero could not utter a word as he was still coming to his senses, lying in the huge crater left by the impact. But it seems that this was not a problem for our hero, and he just smiled when he heard the word right. He opened his eyes wide and began to scream with intense anger. Doesn't this old man realize who he's messing with and who he's talking to now? At that moment, he activated his magic center, and a huge number of his obedient servants rushed out and immediately attacked this bloody golem, assaulting it from all sides. In a moment, all the attackers had completely destroyed the terrifying golem. The king of the castle couldn't believe his eyes. He watched in horror and couldn't understand how this young man could destroy such a powerful creature in a second. Red drops fell like a bloody rain. The young man decided to put on his hoodie. He quietly walked over to the castle king to finish him off. His face was filled with anger. Even a monster lord couldn't easily create a golem of this level. He turned to the very demon who watched over death, named Bun. I think he did it. A new system message informed our hero that the demon watching death was extremely astonished by what he saw. A few more messages appeared, saying that the death-watching demon was nodding silently while the evil overlord looked on with disdain. Our hero's eyes began to shine brightly, and he felt a deep sense of resentment. Was this demon really interested in seeing what our spirit master was capable of? It seems that he summoned this blood golem when he saw our protagonist fighting one of his followers. Looking straight into the face of this frightened castle lord, our hero told him that he was just a puppet, and now that his mana was gone, he could do nothing more. This was to be expected, as Bun had summoned this golem specifically to help him. In the next second, the kobold's lord shouted with incredible fury that this couldn't be, and that the demon would definitely find this young man and avenge his death. It seems that this was exactly what our mighty warrior needed, and the very next moment he had sent his entire huge army of soldiers after his enemy. The king of the castle was furious and tried to fend off the multiple attacks of his former soldiers. Have they forgotten who their master is? Our hero's magical assistants surrounded the kobold's king on all sides, while the greatest necromancer lifted him high above the ground. Turning to the demon who was helping the king, our warrior declared that he, too, would soon come to an end. It was wrong to test him, and he would regret it. He'll make sure he pays for what he's done. There's a new message. It said that the demon watching the deaths was laughing heartily, shouting that he was really enjoying what was happening. However, our hero was no laughing matter, and in the next instant, he clenched his fist violently, signifying the impending doom of the Kobold King. The death of the lord of the castle was instantaneous and inevitable in such a situation. Still clenching his fist, our hero looked at his enemy hanging in the air with drops of blood dripping down his legs. For a moment, it seemed to our hero that the kobold's lord was still alive. The young man slowly approached him to devour his soul, leaving a trail of bloody footprints behind him. At that moment, the lord's soul began to float in the air, about to leave his body. But our hero managed to grab it in time to stop it from flying away, because it was his well-deserved reward. He said with a smile that they weren't done yet, and while this soul was screaming, he would create a special orb out of it. It was one of the basic skills of a necromancer. This skill allowed one to collect souls and create medicines. Now, all our hero had to do was swallow this soul orb, which he did with great pleasure. After a moment, he opened his eyes and saw many system messages telling him that his specs had increased. However, it wasn't as cool as he expected. Such actions on his part will be useless once he gets to the 5th floor. Suddenly, the girl he had saved earlier appeared in front of him. She looked at him with her adorable eyes and thanked him for his help before introducing herself and giving her full name. Our hero told her not to worry, as he had only come to deal with the Lord of the Kobolds. Respecting her manners, the girl replied that he should be thanked anyway. The MC decided to give her a test, so he looked at her with a very stern look and asked her what she would do if he turned out to be a bad guy. After all, he could have killed her or sold her as a slave. And in the next second, the girl's eyes were filled with rage and glowed intensely. In that case, she said, she would have to take action. She seemed to be a typical goblin. Our hero exhaled and noted with a smile that they were very persistent when it came to promises or revenge. There was one question that interested our hero. He was curious how she could have ended up here. After all, whoever is supposed to be on the 100th floor never comes down. For a while, the girl didn't know what to answer. After a moment's pause, she said quietly, "The goblin village is under attack." It was as if lightning had struck our hero's head. The words stunned him. He began to think about what she had just told him. After all, the goblins in the tower were considered powerful creatures. Not even the Hodaks have an easy time with them. Does she really want to tell him that it was one of the 4 great creatures? In this place, the source of power were giants, the source of magic were dragons, the masters of dark energy were demons, while the wings of vengeance were angels. These creatures control the entire tower and keep it from falling apart by maintaining a certain balance. In the young man's opinion, only one of them could have disturbed the goblins so much, or someone who had managed to gain their support. Maybe it was the same Star 9 unit that betrayed him. It could have been them, someone connected to that unit. His face twisted with intense anger as he remembered that unit. The girl, looking at him from the side, asked if he was all right. The young man briefly replied that he was fine and had to leave. But the girl wasn't going to let him go so easily. She wanted to know where he was going. He asked her a counter question, wondering if she would stay here in the middle of this huge pool of blood. Suddenly, to his surprise, she declared that if he would allow it, she would like to go with him. He wondered for a while, because she was too young, but maybe she was worth taking along. However, he replied that he would be very busy and would not be able to protect her. The girl was happy when she realized that he was taking her with him, adding that she could take care of herself. Our hero, however, didn't believe her words and added that she had just been almost killed by a kobold. The girl was furious at his words and explained that she had just let her guard down. Taking a deep breath, our hero realized that he had no choice but to take her with him. But now he had to change his clothes, as he might draw attention to himself with his bloody clothes. While he was talking about the clothes, a special icon appeared next to him, above the body of the dead king of the castle, informing him about the new ammunition available to our hero. It was some special equipment that he had also received as a reward. After a while, when the young man had changed his clothes, they began to leave this dilapidated castle. Suddenly, to the girl's surprise, she found magical vortexes in front of her that began to swirl, creating a magical whirlpool. After a moment, someone came out of that vortex, and she hid behind our hero's back, a little scared. It was our hero's multiple army of soldiers and his faithful servant Vulcan, who informed his master that there were no more kobolds in the castle. Our hero smiled and thanked his servant for a great job, but the girl was still scared and asked him who it was. Vulcan was very surprised that this girl could see him, but she replied that some goblins have a connection to souls, so his presence didn't seem strange to her, even if it was a bit frightening. Our hero seemed happy to hear such information from her, because he realized that she was a special goblin. For a moment, he even thought that maybe he should use his gluttony ability to absorb her powers. However, he thought about it very early and it would be better to train her a bit more. Suddenly, a new system message appeared in front of him, informing him that destroying the monster lord might trigger a new wave and attacks, so all safe areas on the first floor would be inaccessible after accepting the task. He had to make a choice. He was very happy about this news and seemed to be ready to press yes on the screen. However, behind his back, even Vulcan and the girl were terrified by such information, realizing that a wave of monsters was too serious. Is he really going to accept this mission? With his usual grin, the young man replied that he wouldn't have come all this way if he didn't want to. As soon as he said that, several system messages appeared in the next second, informing him that the evil lord considered it reckless. The other gods did not understand his recklessness either. The demon who watches over death will give him a reward if he gets first place in this fight. Our hero obviously loved all these messages and was ready to take up the challenge for more rewards and achievements. However, he decided to wait, and before making a decision, he wanted to see the reward he would receive after the battle. Meanwhile, the Vulcan tried to talk him out of it. Does he really want to end his life as soon as possible? But the young man replied that he was aware that it was most likely the Vulcan itself that wanted him dead, for then it would be completely free. But there was one nuance, and that nuance was that the Vulcan would be its servant even after our hero's death. Without thinking long, our greatest necromancer put his finger on the screen and pressed yes. And as soon as he did, the system alerted all the other players on the floor that someone had taken a wave of monsters and the kobolds were about to attack the entrance to the village. Soon, all safe areas on the first floor would be inaccessible. At that time, people in the kobolds' village couldn't believe their eyes, thinking that some idiot had done it. Is anyone going to die here? After all, the monster wave was a very serious challenge. They had not yet finished their tasks, so one of the heroes advised the others to quickly go up to the second floor to save their lives. After all, once the attack begins, they will have no way to escape. But it seems to be too late. In the next second, lightning flashed in the sky and a huge energy portal opened up, releasing countless evil kobolds in the direction of the warriors. They immediately rushed to attack all the players who were still on this floor. It was too late to run anywhere. But suddenly, a loud voice in a commanding tone told everyone to get the hell out of here and not to touch a single kobold. As if from nowhere, our hero appeared and with a smile told them that he would get rid of all those who would hinder him on his way. The players present had no idea who they were. Luckily for them, our team appeared just in time, as those terrifying monsters were about to attack them. In the next second, our hero activated his magic center and cast the Rise spell, causing a large number of soldiers from his personal army to descend upon those monsters. By this time, one of the players was absolutely certain that the player in front of them was a necromancer. What he couldn't figure out was how this player could have such a high level on the first floor. Meanwhile, an epic battle between two armies was taking place on this green lawn. Like a general, our hero stood by and watched as his loyal servants destroyed these kobolds. A young goblin girl, eager to join the fight, offered her help to our hero, for she too could fight. Our necromancer didn't mind, but he advised the young girl to hurry because his army might not leave her any enemies. She replied not to worry her new friend, because she had an interesting idea. Suddenly, the girl began to use her magical abilities and an energy ball appeared in front of her. Our hero was very surprised. He never expected to see something like that from a young goblin. However, out of nowhere, the girl was able to create a magnificent sword for herself. It was just in time for her, because at that moment she was attacked by evil monsters. One of them jumped in her direction to strike her with its sharp claws. However, the girl immediately grabbed her sharp blade and sliced the monster into pieces. The protagonist was still surprised because it was a very challenging sword. Besides, this young goblin is very skilled with it. And now an interesting thought occurred to him. Maybe she was the target of the attack in that goblin village on the 100th floor. But someone distracted the necromancer and began to speak to him in a very familiar manner. Our hero turned toward the sound to see who was speaking to him. It was one of the new players, who didn't understand why our hero had created this wave of attacking monsters. However, the necromancer made no excuses and decided to find out the name of this upstart first. The young man introduced himself as Song Dae, one of the leaders of the White Swallow Guild. From the expression on his opponent's face, the young man realized that he had heard absolutely nothing about this guild. Then he proudly added that it was the famous Palin brother and sister guild, and the White Swallow was their daughter guild. As soon as our hero heard the familiar names, his expression changed dramatically, and he was shocked by this information. He asked the young man again which daughter guild he belonged to. The novice warrior proudly replied that his older brother was a member of the White Swallow Guild, and they all wanted to reach the 10th level. He complimented our hero on his skills, saying that he was quite good. If he talked to his brother, he might be able to get to the 10th floor with them. But the next second, the young man was embraced by our hero's warriors, and the last thing he heard from his lips was, "I'm sorry, but no." One of the necromancer's loyal servants held the young man's neck so tightly that he couldn't breathe. Our hero rejoiced at the appearance of his loyal soldier, for it was just in time. He took the young man's sword and informed him that he just had to check on a few things. Pointing the tip of his sword at his face, our hero explained that he would meet him a little later, after the wave of monsters had passed, as he still had a few questions to ask the novice player. The other players didn't seem to realize who they were dealing with. They began to argue with our hero, saying that he had gotten in their way. They're all just comrades, though, and you shouldn't intimidate them with your power. However, the necromancer disarmed them with his reply that his behavior was obvious. After all, in his opinion, these players were incapable of hitting, killing, or stealing anything because there was absolutely no need for it on Earth. But in the tower, strength was simply necessary, so his behavior fit into that logic. As soon as these young men took offense at his words, they were immediately attacked by our hero's loyal soldiers. The necromancer, however, decided to spare the chief informant. Afterwards, he added that he should listen carefully to what he had to say, for he had kept him alive only to find out the interesting details a little later. With his sword in hand, our hero headed for the main battle, adding that they should stay away from him as he could easily kill them. The young men tried to reason with their leader and waited for some kind of reaction from him. But as soon as he regained his strength, he shouted at the top of his lungs for them to run away quickly, because if he caught them again, they would surely be finished. At that time, the battle didn't think of stopping. However, those monsters that had recently attacked our hero's soldiers immediately turned into his loyal servants. One of the commanders of this attacking squad pointed to the sky, and in the next second, our necromancer and his faithful servant Vulcan descended upon them with tremendous force. Their strike was so powerful that it was like the explosion of a large projectile, scattering many monsters over a great distance. And even though Vulcan thought that there were too many monsters, our hero told him with a smile that in that case, he would fight back and he would just have to watch. However, he understood his humor and said that he would continue to help him. Our hero then called his army of skeletons to rise up and attack the monsters. To the horror of the forest dwellers, they were attacked by warriors made of bones, who began to grab them by the arms, bite their necks, and destroy them, turning them into servants of their master. Not long ago a small monster, but now a true skeleton warrior and loyal soldier of the necromancer. Our hero made a sharp kick with his foot and flew high into the air. After that, he decided it was time to play. He obviously liked everything that was going on here. The hero landed on the ground with tremendous force to deliver another powerful blow that scattered all those monsters like skittles. Nevertheless, our hero continued to make incredibly fast attacks with his sharp sword, destroying one kobold after another. However, he had someone else helping him, and that someone was a young goblin girl who was skillful with her weapon and also destroyed many monsters. However, even though she was an excellent swordswoman, it was still difficult for her to fight a large number of enemies. There really were a lot of them, and she was visibly tired. But as soon as she thought about it, one of the kobolds pounced on her and ripped her back open with a sharp slash of its claws. She was bleeding and screaming in extreme pain. However, it was nothing compared to what she experienced when her home village was burned. She became even angrier and began to destroy one monster after another with incredible strength and energy. She moved so fast that they didn't have time to not only attack her, but also to defend themselves. Now she had no strength left at all, and she fell to the ground because she couldn't fight anymore. Would she die at the hands of these monsters that were still around? However, in the next second, behind her back, a powerful energy blast went off, scattering many of those monsters to the side. It was absolutely amazing. She turned around and noticed that our protagonist was fighting these monsters with ease, destroying them one by one. How on earth could he have such incredible strength? The girl thought. With all her might, she tried her best to get up and stay close to our hero. Maybe then she'd be able to avenge her village. But once again, she was attacked from behind by one of the monsters, who was ready to hit her hard with his fist. But in the next moment, thanks to a powerful energy shot, the rascal lost his head. Old Vulcan appeared just in time to save the girl. He asked if she was all right. Though her body was shaking with exhaustion, she replied that she could manage on her own. The experienced Vulcan realized that she was determined and must have been through a lot to end up here. But her question surprised him. Had he really come to help her? Leaning on her sword, she added that no one had even tried to help her when she had escaped from the 100th floor. She could only be happy that no one had hurt her. But now that they've already saved her life twice, she suspected that they might be helping her for their own benefit. But Vulcan could not answer her question, for he himself did not know what his master was up to. Servants like him had to obey the orders of their spiritual masters. That was their only duty, which meant that he had to guard her and make sure that she didn't die. After that, Vulcan began to fly away from her, adding at the end that if he did not help his master, he would surely scold him for shirking his work. With a trembling hand, the girl clung to her sword, for our hero was the only one who had helped her in the tower, and now she would surely repay him with her gratitude. In the next instant, she activated the magic center in her body. Suddenly, a special red mask appeared on the surface, resembling a powerful goblin. The girl immediately put the mask on her face, and her eyes flashed with red fire. The next moment, she screamed in an incredible demonic voice, and there was no trace of the former young, demure girl. Meanwhile, during the battle, Vulcan and our hero noticed that an incredibly powerful energy charge had passed near them. This was also noticed by the other monsters, who were blinded by the bright flash and didn't realize what was happening. But to their surprise, the girl looked at everyone with her new demonic gaze. Her eyes glittered like bright diamonds, and she was ready to do battle with a large group of these monsters. Now they had no chance to do any damage, and the young goblin began to attack one monster after another, delivering her deadly blows. She moved at a speed that none of these monsters had ever seen before. Literally in a matter of seconds, she managed to hit many of these kobolds. But that wasn't the end of it. She was just getting the hang of it. The very next second, she flew towards the new group of monsters with incredible speed, screaming loudly, to fight them and finally destroy them. Such a scene could not go unnoticed by our hero, who observed some super bright flashes in the sky. But he realized that an ordinary goblin couldn't move that fast. Now he finally realized that those attacking the village were looking for this particular girl and her incredibly fast sword. Of course, such information is best kept secret. After all, if she found out that she was the one who destroyed the village, who knows what she might do to herself? The system informed our players that there was only 1 minute left until the end of the attack wave. Meanwhile, an incredible battle was unfolding on the ground, and it wasn't clear what was going on. Flashes of energy, bright reflections from sword movements, explosions. More and more waves of attacks from our heroes and monsters didn't stop for a second. It wasn't long before they noticed that the magic gate was shrinking. Fewer and fewer warriors were coming out of the portal. Smiling, our hero looked at the kobold and noted that it seemed to be the last of the attacking monsters. He immediately swung hard and threw his sword at the monster with incredible speed, hitting it and throwing it a long way away. And he threw the monster back exactly where it came from, back into the magic labyrinth. In the next second, the portal slammed shut and the wave of attacks stopped. The system informed our hero that he had successfully stopped the wave. Of course, this was exactly what he needed, so he accepted the information with a smile. This news also pleased Vulcan, who praised our hero. This event also pleased our necromancer's new assistant, the girl who seemed to fight this battle with her last strength. She was glad that it was over. Suddenly, someone came up and put his arms around her. It was our hero. He asked her if she was okay. He then advised her not to use such a powerful skill when she felt her strength was running low. She was once again pleased to have such sincere support from him and thanked him again for his help. New system notifications appeared in front of our heroes, telling them that the wave of attacks was over. Now they should receive their rewards. This news made our hero very happy, and he eagerly awaited his well-deserved gems and skill points.